Yes. Okay. So y'all know now it's being recorded. If you have your camera on, don't do anything crazy. So we're going to continue through to adverse childhood experiences. So if you guys have the handouts, there is one of the handouts that I gave you that looks like this. I don't know if I can show it to you well, but it is the adverse childhood experiences checklist. And if you have that, I'm going to read it to you, and I want you to just think about if you had any of these happen in your life. So obviously don't tell me, but just think about if you have any of these happen in your life. Did a parent or other adult in the household often or very often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you? Or act in a way that made you afraid you might be physically hurt? Yes or no? Did a parent or other adult in the household often or very often push, grab, slap, or throw something at you? Or ever hit you so hard that you had marks or were injured? Did an adult or person at least 5 years older than you ever touch or fondle you, or have you touch their body in a sexual way, or attempt to or actually have oral, anal, or vaginal intercourse with you? Did you often or very often feel that no one in your family loved you or thought about you or important or special, or your family didn't look out for, feel close to, or support each other? Yes or no? Did you often or very often feel that you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, and had no one to protect you, or your parents were too drunk or high to take care of you or to take you to the doctor if you needed it? Yes or no? Did you often or very often feel that, I just read that one, sorry. Were your parents ever separated or divorced? Was your mother or stepmother often or very often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or had something thrown at her? Or sometimes, often, or very often kicked, bitten, hit with a fist, or hit with something hard? Or ever repeatedly hit at least a few minutes or threatened with a gun or a knife? Yes or no? And did you live with anyone who was a problem drinker or an alcoholic or who used street drugs? Was a household member depressed or mentally ill? Or did a household member attempt suicide? And did a household member go to prison? So there were 10 questions in that ACE survey. And as you can see on this pyramid in front of you, this is kind of how they stack on top of each other. And so people who have adverse childhood experiences have disrupted neurodevelopment. They often have social, emotional, and cognitive impairment, which makes them adopt health risk behaviors frequently, which leads to disease, disability, and social problems, which can lead to early death. So they said that if you, on that checklist that I just read to you, that you guys have in your handouts, if you have more than 4 of those adverse childhood experiences, you are more likely to experience alcoholism or drug use. They said if you have more than 6 of them, you will likely die 20 years earlier than your peers without intervention. And so trauma has a big effect. All of those different adverse childhood experiences were different traumas. And it's not something that is just will go away. It's something that needs to be addressed and needs to be talked about through therapy or something else. And so some people, there's a book that I've read, some of called The Body Keeps the Score. And it talks about how your body holds on to stress, and your body, there are different points in your body where your body will hold on to that trauma and that stress. And your body remembers times throughout the year. So say, for example, a person,
Josiah? Sorry. I don't know how to turn this off.
say, yeah, we're all learning. Yeah. So, yeah, The Body Keeps the Score is really good. A person experiences a trauma in January. Then the next year, they a lot of times have crazy behaviors, or they start feeling out of control. They have bad behaviors in January, and you can't figure it out until you start looking at it and you realize that that was when they had their trauma. And I don't know all of the research behind it because I didn't memorize that whole book. Um, but your body holds on to it, and your body remembers those traumas and reacts to those traumas year after year. And so it's kind of a crazy phenomenon. But the adverse childhood experiences is just so that you know, that those experiences that I talked about, a lot of our kids, if you're in the classroom, a lot of the people around us have experienced those things and are reacting to it. So this is a slide that is a PET scan of trauma and how it affects the brain. And just wanted to let you see this to know that this is not just sorry, this is not just something that I'm making up, but it is actually a physical thing that changes. So you can see that brain on the left is a picture of a healthy brain. There's blood flowing all throughout the brain. And it's a child who has been well taken care of, not bad adverse childhood experiences. But the one on the right shows a PET scan of the brain of a Romanian orphan who was institutionalized shortly after birth. And so extreme deprivation in infancy you see these spots. I don't know if you can see my mouse moving, but you see these circles. And there is no blood flow on that abused brain where there is blood flow on the healthy brain. And that is, if you think of your brain as like your fist, this part that comes over the front, which is the temporal lobes, is, thanks Cynthia for leaving that book title there. So that front part is the temporal lobes. That is where your executive functioning takes place. So that is where your emotional regulation happens. That is where your executive function, where your impulse control, all of those higher order thinking skills take place. Down here is like your brain stem, and that is where your fight, flight, or freeze, your fear brain, we call it the fear brain. Your body is in survival mode when you are in that part of the brain. And so when something happens to a child or an adult and they are scared, their executive functioning leaves and their brain flips. And they just are working out of their fear brain and their fight, flight, or freeze brain. And so if you try to talk someone through something, try to be logical, try to be sequential with a child or a person who is in their fear brain, you're not going to get anywhere until you can meet their needs and get them back thinking in their frontal lobe. So just know that, and know that the brain is actually changed. And the way to get the brain flowing again, or not the brain, the blood flowing back to those front parts of your brain is through connections. And it's not going to just happen overnight. It is going to be a slow process, and it is going to be a hard process, but it will make it so that things are better in the future for the child or adult you're thinking of. How long does it typically take? Oh my goodness. It just depends on how much abuse there was, and on that child, and on if there are any other outside things for a child to start to return. Oh, do you mean like if they are in their fear brain? Is that what you're talking about, Bethany? Yes. Okay. So that also will depend, all of these things will depend on each child because every person is different. Every adult is different. But you will be able to, you kind of have to be a detective and learn their signs. So I have had kids that melted down for 2 hours. I have had kids that were able to snap out of it in 15 minutes. But it is how well you were able to keep yourself calm. Yes, it is very hard for foster parents. Yes. I think that the number one thing that I have seen that helps is how well the adult is able to keep themselves calm. Because if the child is escalating and the adult is escalating, they're just going to continue to escalate each other. But if the adult can stay calm, then the child will be able to calm down with them. And I'll talk more about different ways to do this in just a minute in continuing. But yeah, it's just making that child know that they are safe and not getting onto them for anything, but just helping them to know that they are safe and that they are loved and that nothing's going to hurt them. So we're going to talk about these 4 essential skills, and this is taken from the Trauma Competent Caregiver series. Hang on just a second. I'm going to turn my fan on in here because it's really hot. Just a second. Okay, so these are taken from the Trauma Competent Caregiver series that I'm a trainer of. And so these are the 4 essential skills that we're going to spend the rest of the time talking about. Understanding the impact of trauma, maximizing felt safety, reducing overwhelming emotions and building connections, and modifying overwhelming behaviors and building connections. And those last 2 sound kind of similar, but there's a lot of difference in them. So we're going to start with understanding the impact of trauma on a child's behavior, development, and relationships. So trauma, you saw the brain scan so far. You saw that it is something that actually the blood flow changes, but trauma can also affect a child's developmental age, emotional age, and their sensory processing or lack of sensory processing. So a child who goes through trauma, they usually, whatever age they are when that trauma occurs, they frequently stop their developmental stage right there. And it will take a while for them to get past that. And so also they've said that a kid who has experienced trauma will be half of their developmental age or half of the emotional age. Those 2 kind of go hand in hand, just depending on the child. And so if you think about a child who is 6 and they are in the classroom or they are around you, they are in the house, wherever they are, and they are not acting their age, they're acting 3, that could be because of the trauma either happened when they were 3, and so they stopped developing at that spot, or they had trauma when they were younger, and so they are half of their emotional age. And so telling a kid, why don't you just act your age, doesn't help, because a lot of times they're doing the best they can. And so I don't think I have anything in this specific training about the different developmental stages, but if that's something you guys want more information about, let me know and we can talk about that sometime in the future. But just know that a kid's development is stunted. Their physical development and their emotional development, those things get messed up. Now, we are going to talk about a little bit about sensory processing disorder, because frequently kids who have been through trauma have trouble with their senses, and they a lot of times will act like they have a lot of bad behaviors. There are kids who frequently get in trouble at school, who frequently get in trouble everywhere they go because they can't keep their hands off of people, or they get overwhelmed by sounds and they have these bad behaviors. But a lot of times it is because of their senses being overwhelmed. So sensory processing disorder is when the neurons in your brain don't connect and fire like they do in a typical person, in a typical developing child or adult. And so they can have sensory processing issues in their sight. They may be really thrown off by bright lights. And so fluorescent lights are a big trigger for a lot of kids. So if you can just turn the lights off. I have seen my oldest son has some sight avoidance, and I've seen just the difference between him in a room that has fluorescent lights on and a room that has just a lamp on. It's crazy. I don't know if I really understood this until I saw this in my child. But just know that that's a thing. And then there's also auditory. Some kids really, kids can be sensory seeking or sensory avoiding. So some kids really thrive on that loud noise, but some kids, it just overwhelms them and makes their body just feel crazy, like nails on a chalkboard. And then there's tastes and smell. Taste and smell a lot of times go hand in hand, where kids will either crave strong taste or they cannot do certain senses. Certain textures. So they have to, there's some kids who smell everything because they crave that sensory input. And then there's kids who are just super sensory avoiding, and don't want to smell anything that is abnormal to them. Um, Another thing that people don't know about a lot of times is proprioception and vestibular senses. And proprioception is kind of how your body um, orients itself in the world. And that is like the pressure on your body. Um, and so a lot of times kids who walk along the hall and touch everything, they're trying to meet that sensory need. And so um, kids who are always leaning on you, kids who are always kids they say their socks are hurting them or their tags are hurting them. A lot of times that is a sensory issue, and you can fix that with compression clothing or with tight squeezes. There's different pressure points that I can't really show very well on myself. If I had a model here, I could show you better. But you can Google that, different pressure points that can help with that proprioception. And then vestibular has to do with the inner ear. And so kids who don't like turning upside down or really do like turning upside down. You see kids who just flip everywhere they go, kids who are always rolling all over the furniture, or kids who don't like swings. These come and go both ways. That's the vestibular sense. Kids who spin around or rock, a lot of times they are giving themselves sensory input through that vestibular sense. And there's a big connection with ADHD, PTSD, and trauma. A lot of times, if they do a brain scan of a kid who has ADHD or who has been diagnosed with ADHD, and a kid who has been through trauma, it will look like a PTSD brain, because the brain is reacting that way. That same fight or flight, they are trying to survive. Any questions before I move on these developmental, sensory, emotional? Okay. So now, maximizing felt safety is the next skill. So, maximizing felt safety, there is I'll talk about that. So supporting healthy brain chemistry is the first part of maximizing felt safety. And supporting healthy brain chemistry means that every 2 hours, kids' brains need sensory input, hydration and nutrition, and physical activity. And so even just, I'm sure you guys have all heard of the phrase hangry. Kids who have been through trauma, they've shown that their brain can't process sugar as well a lot of times, so their blood sugar will crash and they will look like they are in a rage. And if you can just get some food or water in them, a lot of times they will just calm back down. Like, those Snickers commercials that are like, hungry, why wait? And it's the person going crazy, and then they get food and they're calm. Yeah, that's what happens. But it's important to be aware of this and get to it before the kid or the adult gets to that point, because once they're in that fear brain, it's a whole lot harder to calm them back down. But if you can see that, oh, they haven't eaten in 2 hours, I need to get some food in them, or they're going to get hangry and they're going to go into that meltdown. That's how you solve these problems, is by being proactive, making sure you get them sensory input. These are things that you can do to be proactive, so that will help when you asked Bethany about how long it takes to get them functioning back again. If you have them in healthy brain chemistry and you have them getting sensory input every 2 hours, having hydration and nutrition every 2 hours, and having physical activity every 2 hours, then you will be able to prevent a lot of those meltdowns. Now, heard me say a lot, not all of them. Some of them are still going to happen no matter whether you have healthy brain chemistry or not. But you can prevent a lot of those things by having those sensory input, hydration and nutrition, and physical activity every 2 hours. And these are things that help in the classroom also. So you can do a brain break, or you can they did a study in inner city Detroit, I think it was, where they gave high schoolers a water break every hour, and the discipline decreased by 80% just by giving them a water break every hour. And that, I mean, that is giving them physical activity because they're getting up out of their chairs and walking to the water fountain. They may have some sensory input by having a different situation, I mean, different surroundings. But that hydration every hour can decrease that the outbreaks, the bad behaviors. And so I want to talk about the difference between safety and felt safety, because an adult can know a child is safe, but this kid still doesn't feel safe. Just because you tell a child you're safe, that doesn't mean they feel safe, because sometimes they have been through so much in their lives that they don't feel safe. And remember, this can be pre-birth also. This can be in utero. That stuff is ingrained in them. If they were not safe in utero, then they still, even if they have been safe for the entire time that their brain remembers, they can still have trouble with felt safety. So think about an airplane versus a car, okay? We know that statistically you are more safe in an airplane than you are in a car. Statistically, you are less likely to die, less likely to get in a crash if you were in an airplane than if you were in a car. But do you see many people who are scared of riding in a car? No, you see people who are scared of riding in an airplane, even though statistically it makes no sense. But it is because when you are riding in an airplane, you're not in control. When you are riding in a car, usually you are in control because you're driving, or you are right there next to someone who is driving, and you feel more in control when you're driving in a car than when you're flying in an airplane. And that's kind of the difference between safety and felt safety. A lot of times when children are scared, they try to take control of the situation. Just like people are scared of flying because they don't have control. A lot of times the bad behaviors that we see from kids who have been through trauma is really fear-based. And so if you can see, sorry, it's not COVID, I promise, my throat's just getting dry because I'm talking so much. But I'm in my own room, so it doesn't matter. So a lot of times, if you can figure out what is going on with that kid, you can see their need and you can meet their need, then their behaviors, bad behaviors will decrease, their good behaviors will increase. And it also helps if you can share control with the kids. So helping them feel like they are more in control of things. I know they can't be in control of everything. I know the adult has to be in control a lot of times. That's not what I'm saying. Kids feel scared when they're not in control. Wait, let me rephrase that. So kids feel scared when the adult can't control the situation, because if the adult, who's supposed to be the safe person, cannot be in control, then it's a scary world. But when they feel scared, they try to take that control. I don't know if that makes sense, but I hope that makes sense to you guys. So a mantra that we have in our house a lot of time is, you are safe, I am in control, and nothing's going to happen to you. And a lot of times when I see my kids are getting out of control, or they're just kind of having crazy seeming behaviors, I will just stop and say, you are safe, I am in control, nothing's going to happen. And just reminding them of those things will help calm them down a lot of times. But you can share control by doing compromises, by giving kids choices, making sure that you are okay with whatever choice they decide, but giving them choices like, hey, would you rather walk across the street holding my hand or holding my pinky finger, if they have to hold your hand, if you need them right there with you. But just give them some kind of control in that choosing will help them feel a lot more safe and reduce some of those behaviors. Okay, so in maximizing the child's sense of felt safety, I'm going to tell you kind of a story about two different kids. One kid, the first kid, this kid on the left, right here, has a large window of tolerance. And they've grown up in a nurturing and responsive environment where they're mastering self-regulation. Of course, like any child from this environment, they have moments of dysregulation. However, they have a large window of tolerance when disappointments or challenges come. They're able to regulate themselves in response to these disappointments or challenges most of the time. So this is a kid who is getting all of that healthy brain chemistry input that they need at home. Now, if you look at that other kid, this one that has a small window of tolerance and your threshold is high, it's a kid who has grown up in a neglectful, abusive environment where he had no opportunity or ability to learn self-regulation. He's full of dark emotion, anger, fear, and frustration. When confronted with changes in schedule, disappointments, or emotional challenges, he potentially erupts in dysregulated responses, which looks like bad behavior. And they're generally fear-based responses. And so if you think about kids that you see in school setting or in a church setting, and some kids, someone touches them and they're just totally fine with it and they just keep on going. And another kid, a kid touches them and they just explode. And you're like, come on, they just touched you. This is ridiculous. But it's because they have that small window of tolerance because no one has been helping them regulate at home. No one has been has understood all of this stuff that I'm telling you and has been able to help them regulate themselves. So just keep those two things in mind with maximizing their felt safety. If they feel safe. Sorry, I'm not used to talking this long, especially with us being in quarantine. So my throat is super dry and scratchy. So just think about this when you are working with kids, that helps them. Okay. So continuing maximizing felt safety, these are some other things that are helpful. Using safe touches. That means ask kids before you touch them. Some kids, touch isn't a safe thing in their mind. And so if you just go up to them and rub their head, go up to them, touch their head, some kids really don't like their head being touched, or some kids really don't like being touched. And so asking them, hey, can I give you a hug? Or hey, can I touch your head? Makes them feel a little bit more in control. And it also makes it so that they are not in their fear brain worried about not being touched. And that could be a sensory issue. It could be from something they've experienced in their life, but safe touches are super important. Make it safe to talk. And this means that when kids tell you something, you don't overreact. Say a kid tells you that they hate you, which if you are working with kids from trauma, you're probably going to hear that a lot. But it's okay. You just wear it like a badge. Yeah, I know you hate me. It's okay. That means I'm doing something right. But you don't explode on them, because if they can't talk about their emotions without being in trouble, then they're not going to talk to you anymore. So making it safe to talk is not exploding when they tell you things about their emotions, but just saying, hey, I wonder why you feel that way. I wonder what's going on that makes you hate me. Can we work through it together? Now, you can't always fix those things, but just helping them understand that they are being heard is important. And we use something called the safety script at my house. And I'm going to type it in the comments so you can see it. I'm going to type it and then tell you just a second. Safe place to get you some. Okay, so the safety script is saying whatever you're working on, whatever you're dealing with, whether it is hitting or punching or spitting or saying bad words, you say, this is a safe space and I won't allow anyone to hit you. So I can't allow you to hit because this is a safe space. It could be, this is a safe space and I won't allow anyone to use bad words with you, mean words with you. So I can't allow you to use mean words because this is a safe place. And that safety script just lets them know that you have the rules in place for their safety, not just to be the mean ogre, but you have the rules in place for their safety. And so that is super helpful. Then making the day predictable. And I'm going to tell you, this is super important, especially right now. If you have kids in your home at all who have been through any kind of trauma, they're probably losing it. With all of this, with their schedule being changed so much. And you may not have previously before today known that this is why they were losing it, but their world is completely unpredictable right now. And that's scary to them. I mean, it's scary to all of us, but if you can give them a schedule, a daily schedule, from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock, we get up, we eat breakfast, we do this. At 9 o'clock every day, we do this. At 10 o'clock every day, we do this. And of course, you can go off of that schedule some a little bit, but that's why a lot of times these kids do really great during the school year, and then in the summer just lose it because there's no schedule whatsoever. And so if you have kids in your home who have been through trauma and are home from school, or I mean, any kids thrive off of trauma, off of schedules in general. But I really encourage you to make a schedule for your day, just to let your kids know what is coming, because it is less scary for them and they will fight you for control less when they know what's coming. And then you can also blame what you have to do on the calendar. Sometimes we at our house are like, they argue with us. I don't want to do that. Well, that's what the calendar says. That's what we have to do. So just joking a little bit. Then preparing the child for transitions. That's helpful. Say that in 5 minutes, TV's going to turn off. It's helpful if you can tell them, all right, 5-minute warning, and then the TV's going off. Okay, 2-minute warning, and then the TV's going off, so that it's not just an abrupt cutoff. That helps them feel safe and they know what's coming. So preparing them for those transitions. And then being a detective and recognizing hotspots. That is super helpful in, you kind of have to be a detective and you have to know what is going to be a trigger for them. And so that's looking for, if you see that they melt down every Tuesday at 5 o'clock, start taking notice of it and seeing what's happening at this time, and ask them why those things are happening. Okay, guys, I'm going to ask you to bear with me for just a second. It is almost 2 o'clock and we're about halfway through. I'm going to take a short break to go drink some water and run to the bathroom. You guys feel free to do that. I'm going to turn my camera and my microphone off for just a second. I'll be back in 5 minutes or less, so that I can get my throat a little less dry. Okay? Let me figure out how to turn my camera off. Oh. Okay, guys. Got a dum-dum to make my throat less dry and refill my water bottle. We're good to go. So let's continue. Like I said, I'm used to doing this with someone, so I get breaks in talking so that my throat has a chance to rejuvenate, but not happening today. So, all right, let's continue with reducing overwhelming emotions and building connections. So, with that, first thing to do is recognize fear indicators. Recognize when they are scared. And some of those things would be fast breathing, clenched fists, their jaws. If they are, you can see if they are clenching their jaws, that is a lot of times a fear indicator. And that means that they need to be de-escalated. You need to bring them back down into their thinking brain, not their fear brain, by breathing with them or by playing calm music, something like that. And then recognizing traumatic stress reactions. And I have this for you on one of the handouts that I sent to you also. It's the one that looks like this. It is 5A5 on the bottom. And it has just different stress reactions that kids might have. They may be re-experiencing the trauma. They may have avoidance, numbing, arousal, anxiety, depression, emotional dysregulation or impulsivity, physical complaints, regression, or oppositional behaviors. Those can all be traumatic stress reactions. So if you guys haven't figured out how to get these handouts, then let me know and I can email them to you. They were on the Eventbrite for you to click on and download, but if you didn't get that, then I can send them out to you so you have them. So recognizing traumatic stress reactions will help reduce those overwhelming emotions. And then you can build connection through using the power of yes. And if you do not know what that means, I am happy to tell you. So the power of yes, if you think about a newborn baby, when you are cradling them, you're telling them, yes, I will take care of you. Yes, I will feed you. Yes, I will change your diaper. You spend the whole first year, at least, of a child's life telling them yes. Yes, I will take care of you. Yes, I love you. You look in their eyes, and a baby can only see about 6 inches, which is about the distance from your elbow to your eyes. So they can see your eyes and make that connection. But when a kid comes into foster care or when you come into their life later, a lot of times we start telling them the rules. This is the rules. You cannot do this. No, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. No, you can't do this, instead of using yes. And so the power of yes is telling children yes when we can, so that you can use that no for things that are more serious. And if you think of it like a piggy bank, the more yes you put in there, then you can have something to withdraw when you need to use a no. And a lot of times we say no because saying yes would be inconvenient for us. And realizing that has made me analyze a lot of the things that I do. As adults, we have to get over ourselves and put the kids first. And don't hear me say you give them anything you want. I am not saying that you need to start letting kids run wild and be free and do whatever they want. What I'm saying is that sometimes you can even say no by saying yes. Let me give you an example. Let's say you pick your kid up from school and you say, hey, how was your day? And they're like, it was good. Can we go get ice cream? And you really don't want to get ice cream before you have dinner. So you say, hey, that's a really great idea. Let's do that tomorrow after dinner. And I didn't say no, but I also didn't say yes. And please hear me say that these are not always going to work. I'm just trying to give you some tools for your tool belt. I am living the trauma life in my house, and it's not always a rainbows and butterflies pretty picture, but these are some things that we use and that can help you also. So the power of yes also. So say, for example, you have a kid who always asks for a power bar right before dinner, and you don't want to feed them right before dinner because you want them to be hungry for their dinner, but they may have food insecurities by because of situations that have happened in their life. And remember, these could also be prenatal. They could also be in utero. If their mom wasn't fed, then they weren't getting fed. So they may have that food insecurity, even when it is implicit memory instead of memories that they remember. So you can use the power of yes through this. So say there's a kid, you tell them no, and they always escalate, and it ends up in this huge fight because they just want that power bar, and you tell them no, and they storm to their room, and they can't they can't re-regulate themselves because they don't know how to re-regulate themselves. Well, using that same situation, but using the power of yes. So a kid comes and asks for a power bar right before dinner. Instead of saying, no, you can't have that, it's too close to dinner, you say, yeah, you can have the power bar, but I want you to eat it after dinner. Do you want to hold on to it, or do you want me to? You don't escalate. You don't yell. You let them know that they can have it, but that you want them to eat it after dinner. And so a lot of times kids will just lay it down. And they just need to know that it's there. They need to know that there's going to be food. So that is utilizing the power of yes, and just giving them that voice. So also giving voice to the child helps reduce those overwhelming emotions and build connection. That means that you use good eye contact. And a lot of times kids who have been through trauma don't like eye contact at all. And so saying, look at my eyes, in that mean voice is not going to ever get them a connection. But all of this comes from Dr. Karen Purvis. She was the one who created TBRI. She passed away, but she started all of this. And she would say, if kids wouldn't look at her, she would say, let me see those pretty purple eyes. And they would be like, no, my eyes are blue. And so just keeping it playful ways she would just like have them look at your eyes in a loving way. That gives them voice. Kids a lot of times can read your face when you don't realize they can read your face. And so the way you have them look at you and the way you respond to them in a loving manner will build that connection and help their brains heal. So we talk about using good eyes and good words. So my whole family went to TBRI camp together last summer, and we got to learn all of these things together. So my kid was learning it and we were learning it together. So it was really, really great. So we've been working on this in my home, and we use good eyes and good words. And so my son he's 7, and he has learned that he needs to have good eyes and good words, or the answer is going to be no every time. And so he will come up to me and ask me for something that he thinks I'm going to say no to. And he'll come up and be like, Mom, good eyes and good words. Can I have ice cream right now? And sometimes I have to use the power of yes and say, well, that's a great idea. Let's do it after dinner, after you eat all of your dinner. But he is learning that good eyes and good words are what you need to have their voice, how they get their voice. And we also teach him compromises and choices. So we teach, like I talked about, giving them choices between things, but sometimes you can help by teaching them a compromise, teaching them, say they want to have ice cream because these are skills that you needed as an adult. As an adult, you have to learn how to compromise with other people. It's not always going to be black and white, yes or no. You have to learn how to compromise. And so we're teaching these skills as a way to have happy, functional adults. That's our goal, to have functional adults, not to have complacent, compliant children. So we will say, let's say I say, all right, it's time for the TV to turn the TV off. And they're like, no, I don't want the TV off. And I'm say, well, do you want to compromise? I say, well, we were almost done with this show. It just had 5 more minutes in it. Can I have a compromise and turn it off in 5 minutes when it's over? And that's something that I'd be okay with usually. And so, but you have to teach them. You have to teach them in a time when they're not melting down over something, that they can use their words, use their good words, use their voice. And we have seen that it's not, I think, Bethany, you asked a while back, how long does this take? And I thought you were talking about like for the brain to heal, but I'll tell you that our family went through this TBRI camp back in July, and we have slowly been making all of these changes, and slowly been probably could have done it better, but my husband and I are both busy, as probably a lot of you guys are, and now we've got a lot of downtime. But we have seen since we have started implementing this stuff that our child will use his words. Before it was just he would be mad and storm away, or he wouldn't tell us his emotions. But we have seen now that he is. So that's, let me say, July. It's like 8 months, I think. And it's not perfect at all. We definitely do not have a perfect home, but we have seen huge improvements in him using his words, in him asking for compromises, in him starting to understand his own emotions so that he can start to regulate himself. And this is at 7. So just know that if you start this and next week things aren't better, don't quit, because it will take a little while. It'll be a process. So then for using connecting responses, number 5 there, that is connecting responses are ways that you validate a child, even when they're in trouble. And so, for example, time in and time out. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of time in, but I'm sure you all have heard of time out. So say a kid does something and you want to punish them, which we need to be disciplining them, not punishing them, but you want to discipline them so that you send them to their room for 5 minutes of timeout. That's a super disconnecting response. And so instead, a great way to connect is say, all right, you did the wrong thing. So we're going to have a 5-minute time in. You're going to stand here right next to me while I'm cooking dinner. And they're not allowed to do whatever fun thing they were wanting to do. So they have that being taken away from them, but they're also not punishing them by sending them away from you. So it's still connecting. And I will say that sometimes you need a timeout yourself. Sometimes I need a timeout, and that's okay. It's better to have yourself in control when you are able to then respond to your kids. So if there's a time when you're like, hey, I need a timeout myself before I can respond to whatever is going on with you, then do it. Take some deep breaths, go outside, come back in, and then respond to them when you are calm. But I say that to say that timeout is a very disconnecting response. It sends them away. It lets them know that you don't want to see them, that you don't like them, or that's what they feel. And kids who have been through trauma often have a strong shame core, where they feel that they are worthless. They feel that they have done everything wrong. They get in trouble a lot of times, and so they feel that they are a bad kid. And so speaking into them and using those connecting responses are huge in getting them to change the way that they feel about themselves. So those are using connecting responses. Then let's move on to our last part, and it's 2:15, so I don't know, we might finish early. And that is modifying overwhelming behaviors and building connections. So when a kid misbehaves, it is very important to think about why they misbehaved. Think about, is it because they're hungry? Is it because they've been sitting still for 3 hours? Is it because they haven't had any sensory input for a while? Think about those brain chemistry things. Or think about, is it because their schedule has changed? Is it because their brother took their most prized possession from them? Is it just think about the reasons for their misbehavior. And if you can figure out that why, a lot of times you can help them work through it. So then frustration and aggression. A lot of times kids become deeply frustrated when they can't change what they don't like. And so sometimes their frustration morphs into aggressive behavior. So they need to accept the reality of the things that they can't change and grieve it and adapt to it. And they need to move from mad to sad. So a lot of times we want to protect kids from things, but they need to, from that sadness, but they're never going to move from that aggression to healing unless they understand that there are some things they can't change. For example, a kid who's in foster care, they can't change that they can't live with their mom and dad. That is not their fault. And that's something that they need to move from being mad to being sad about for them to heal and come to a better place. So if you can help them see those things and just help them understand that they are mad about those things. I am also and have been a teacher in a Leader in Me school, and Leader in Me is based on the 7 habits. And they talked about the circle of control and the circle of non-control or uncontrol, something like that. And there's things that you can control and there's things that you can't control. And those things that you can't control, there's no reason to be upset about them because you can't control them. But kids, they don't understand that. And so it's our job as parents, teachers, Sunday school teachers, whatever we are, caseworkers, to help them understand that there are things that they can't control. It's okay to be mad about them. It's okay to be sad about them, but then we need to move on. Then there is the fear of separation. And there are 3 main responses to the fear of separation. And one of them is defensive detachment. And that looks like they close themselves down, or they close themselves off, or they shut down. If they're scared you're going to leave them, they want to shut down before you can leave them and hurt them. There is defensive reattachment, when they are scared you're going to leave them and they will reattach to someone or something else. And a lot of times it is not a healthy thing that they reattach to. So a lot of times they will reattach, like teenagers will reattach to an unhealthy boyfriend or unhealthy girlfriend, unhealthy group of peers. And it's because of that is their response to that fear of separation. And they don't have that attachment that they should have had with their primary caregiver. So a lot of times that's what defensive reattachment looks like. And then defensive dominance. So when a child or teen fears separation from someone, and they defend themselves by attempting to have control, to control the situation. And a lot of times, right now, a lot of kids are scared of separation because they're not in their schools. They're all over the place. So you may be some of these things, that they're shutting themselves down, or they're trying to reattach to other people that aren't healthy, or they are trying to control the situation. It affects them when there's a substitute teacher. Sometimes kids have bad behaviors because there's a substitute teacher, and it's because they're afraid of that unknown, that separation when there's another teacher there. So just know that these are different things that can happen when responses to the fear of separation. Then tracking challenging behaviors. So in your handouts, I also gave you this page. It is a lot bigger in your handouts. It's a big page like this. And it is just a thing to help you track those behaviors. So if you can start keeping a journal or something of what was the behavior, who was in the room, or to whom was it directed, where does it usually occur, when does it occur, and what do you think is the meaning behind the behavior? A lot of times you will see a pattern start to form if you start tracking those behaviors. My 7-year-old, when he was a baby, had night terrors. And if you've never had a child who had night terrors, you are lucky, because they're scary. Night terrors are where they're screaming, they have a nightmare, but they don't fully wake up, and it's hard to get them out of it. And so we talked to our doctor about it, and our doctor said to start keeping a sleep notebook and keep up with when he was waking up. And so once we started tracking it, we could see that he woke up with these or didn't wake up. He had these night terrors about the same time every night. Strange. But so the doctor told us to start not completely waking him up, but just kind of jostling him in his sleep about 15 minutes before he would usually have a night terror. And it quit them because it would reset his sleep cycle. But if we hadn't been tracking it, we never would have realized that it was happening around the same time every night. And so tracking these challenging behaviors can help you see patterns in their behaviors. And so you can help to change things that are surrounding them during those times, and help to to give them calm, help maybe reset them right before that behavior usually happens. But you're not going to know it unless you track it. Then teaching life value scripts. Let me see. Yeah. So these life value scripts are also things that are from Dr. Purvis. They are short phrases that you can teach your kids in a time where everyone is calm. You have to teach them to them in a lesson. I mean, it can be like 10 minutes, but then you have to practice them, but then it can make life so much easier. Instead of having to give them a lecture about something, because, kids aren't going to sit down and listen to a lecture. You can just say a short, playful phrase, like use your words when they're hitting or hurting. Stick together. So we use some of these in my house. My favorite is asking or telling. And that means when they come up to you and say, hey, I want some orange juice. You just say asking or telling, and they rephrase it to, can I have some orange juice, please, Mom? Which doesn't always happen that easily, but you have to teach them. Like I said, you have to teach them what that means, because if they just come up to you and you say asking or telling, they're going to have no clue what you mean. But it took us just a little bit of time to teach them that we use asking words in our house instead of telling words. And then we could just say asking or telling. That ask permission is also great for kids who just go to the refrigerator all the time, who go to get snacks all the time. You can tell them, I'm going to say yes, but I need you to ask permission first. And so then when they go get something that you haven't told them they can have, you just say ask permission, and they know, oh yeah, I got to ask permission. And these are ways that kids learn through play. And so if you can keep things playful, they're going to remember and follow through with what you're teaching them so much better. So these are all just helpful things for you guys to just little life scripts. And you can, if you go on YouTube, Dr. Karen Purvis has all kinds of videos about TBRI, about using life value scripts. And so you can watch those and just see how she uses them. They're really great. So the levels of engagement, modifying overwhelming behaviors and building connection. So when when kids do misbehave, you have to address it, because that's how they learn. You have to address the behavior so that they can learn different behaviors to move on. And so TBRI says that there are, sorry, that looks like it says 6 levels of engagement, but it's because number 6 on my other list was levels of engagement. So there's 4 levels of engagement. And these are the levels of engagement, means the way you respond to the child's misbehavior. And so first, playful engagement. That's what you always want to start with. You always want to go the lowest level of engagement possible. You don't want to over punish, over explode on anything. That's not helpful to anyone. So you want to keep the lowest level of engagement possible. So if you can start with playful engagement, that's always like those life scripts that I just talked about, asking or telling and doing redos. So when in your brain there's like imagine it's like a wilderness with grass grown up all over the place, and every time you do something, you make a path somewhere. And when you do the wrong thing, you're still making a path through that overgrown grass. And so a redo is where you get a kid to physically redo their behavior and do it the correct way. So let's say a kid walks by his brother and hits him in the head as they walk by. You're like, hey, that's not what we do. Let's do a redo. I want you to walk by your brother without touching him. And when they do it correctly, now, they may not do it correctly the first time, but when they do it correctly, they'll start creating a new pathway in their brain that will be a correct behavior. And so over time, that beaten down path for the bad behavior will grow back up, and the pathway for the correct behavior will become the new pathway. But it takes time. They said it takes, I don't remember, somewhere from like around 200 times to create the new pathway, which is a lot, I know, but that also said, this isn't going to be an overnight thing. This is going to be, we are in this for the long haul. We have 18 years to form our kids into healthy adults. So redos are also part of playful engagement, getting them to physically redo what they're doing so that they have that muscle memory to do the correct behavior. But sometimes that doesn't work. Sometimes playful engagement doesn't work. Sometimes you say asking or telling, and they're like, telling, stupid. Of course, I know no one else's parents ever talk to them like that. I mean, kids ever talk to them like that. But, haha, I'm joking, right? So you'll have to get a little more firm with them and use structured engagement. And that is where you tell them two choices. Okay, you can say that with a correct voice, or you can have a consequence. And again, like I've talked about with choices, you have to make sure that the choices are two things that you are okay with, because you don't want the kid to take control. But on that, the structured engagement, that's when instead of just saying like asking or telling, like in a playful tone, you get more on their level and more calm, and your voice gets lower, and you are more structured in the way that you talk to them. You have an authoritative voice and your voice is slower and lower. And I have done this training in a room full of people where, when people are in trainings, they tend to whisper and talk to each other. And when I change my voice from talking in this normal tone to talking in a low and a slow voice and being serious, they get quiet. And so if it works on adults, it works on kids even more so. I have seen that happen. So, because if you get high pitched, it just amps them up and gets them scared, and their adrenaline is going up. But if you use that structured engagement, is using that low, slow voice so that they know you mean business. And then, but sometimes, that still doesn't even work. So you have to use calming engagement. And that's where you are even more serious. You're letting them know you mean business. And, you're calm, you're clear, you're not using long phrases, because by this time, if they are to that level of engagement, they are in their fear brain. And so you need to use short 1 to 2 word phrases like calm down, show them, breathe, breathe, take a deep breath, breathe with them. Those calming things, using tight squeezes. Sometimes it's even just physically getting them in a different room so that you change their environment. We had one night where my son had been melting down, and I had tried to calm him down. I had tried all of my TBRI skills. It wasn't working. So my husband took over, he tapped out, and he was using all of his skills, was getting a little bit more calm, but not completely. And then my 2-year-old walked in, gave him a toy, and they were good to go. And so sometimes just getting them in a different environment, and getting my 2-year-old apparently was the calming that he needed at that time. So just say that to say different things are going to work at different times. Don't feel like a failure if it doesn't work right away. Because I've been through all the training, my husband's been through all the training, and we still have times where we need our 2-year-old to help us get our child calmed down. But these are just, like I said, again, these are strategies to help you out. And you are not finished with your child until they're back to being connected with you. So you don't ever just leave them to say, you can come back to me when you're calm, because they're in their fear brain. They don't have the mental capacity to get themselves calm at that point. So they need you to not leave them in that. They need you to get them back connected to you so they can get that blood flowing to the healthy parts of their brain. And then the 4th level is protective engagement. And that is if a child is harming themselves or someone else. I'm not training you in this, but sometimes they will need a physical restraint. And there are other physical restraint trainings you can go through, but I am not a person to train you in physical restraint. But that's what protective engagement is. And if you are with a foster child or babysitting someone else's child, then protective engagement is when you get help and you get that foster parent or that parent to come help you with that. So those are just those different levels of engagement. And then we have some common behaviors of kids from hard places. These are just things that kids frequently do when they are either in foster care or have come from a hard place. That's what Dr. Purvis called them, kids from hard places. A lot of times they have food insecurities because they have lived through times when they didn't know if they were going to have enough food. A lot of times they lie, and those lies are fear-based. So if a kid lies to you and then tells you the truth and they get in huge trouble, then they're learning to not tell you the truth. And so the way that you fix lying is by responding to them in a calm manner when they do tell you the truth. So if they break something and then they come tell you about it, yeah, there's still going to be some consequences because they can't just break stuff. But you have to respond to them in a calm way, and thanking them, acknowledging that they told you the truth. Thank you for telling me that you just broke that thing. Now we're going to work through it together, but thank you so much for telling me that you broke that thing. That is the way that you can help fix, or that you can fix lying. A lot of times kids from hard places will have regressive behaviors, especially when new traumas happen. So I expect that there are a lot of kids right now who have been potty trained or who are regressing, because their schedule has changed. They're not at daycare, they're not at school, and a lot of times they regress when new traumas happen. We've seen our kids, we're actually not an open foster home anymore because we saw that it was affecting our child from trauma too much. And we noticed that he would regress when we had new kids come in, or he regressed both times my other two biological children were born. Children were born. And so a lot of times you will see them regress, and that's normal. But it just means that you have to keep doing these things that we've talked about, keep working on that connection with them and bringing them back, letting them know that you are in control, they are safe, and nothing's going to happen to them. Sometimes they will go into a caregiver or a mama role. A lot of times the kids from hard places have, they're used to being the person that's in charge. We had a 14-year-old boy who lived with us for 2 years. He was our foster son, and we frequently told him, be a kid, because he would try to take control of everyone else. And it was because that's what he had done at home. He was the oldest of 4 kids, and he was used to being in control. And so you don't ever want to diminish their need to be the caregiver or the mama, but you need to let them know, hey, I got this, you be a kid. And then also internet access through tablets, phones, computers, and especially through social media should be monitored at all times. A lot of times there are kids who they just need it to be monitored, because as you remember, we talked about the developmental ages, that they are a lot of times half of their developmental or emotional age. They don't know how to deal with social media, and there are predators out there who will take advantage of that. And I'm sure you guys know that, but just remember that their tablets, their phones, their computers, you can set controls on them and keep them safe. And then this is my last slide. Let's see. Oh, 2:34. Yep, we're going to be done early, but I don't think my voice can do a whole lot more. And so the ideal response is just how to deal with their misbehaviors. It needs to be immediate, direct, efficient, action-based, and leveled at the behavior, not the child. And so immediate. So that means you need to respond within 3 seconds, because the learning occurs best when the behaviors are addressed immediately. That doesn't mean you wait till your daddy gets home and he's going to talk to you about this, because by that time they forgot. They don't know what they're talking about. And so it needs to be immediate. It needs to be direct. You need to get on that child's level. And like I was talking about, using that soft eye contact, not that mean eye contact, because then you're scaring them and putting them in their fear brain. But that soft eye contact that lets them know you are still in control, but that something's going on. And then it needs to be efficient. And so when I was talking about those levels of engagement, efficient means you use only the amount of intervention necessary to get their behavior back on track. Don't overreact, or it drives them into worse behavior. So, for example, last night my son did something he wasn't supposed to do, and my husband took care of it, and I didn't know that. And then I came home from running, and I found out about what he did, and I punished him, and he exploded. It was because we had over responded. Not on purpose, but we had over responded. It drove him into worse behavior. And so it is important to be efficient, to only use the right amount of, if you can keep it playful, keep it playful. There's no reason to pour a whole bucket of water on a tiny little candle to blow it out. You only want to use the amount of intervention that is necessary. And then keep it action-based. That's the A. Guide them through a redo. Have them physically do something to get them back on track. And then make sure it's leveled at the behavior, not at the child. Like I talked about before, kids from hard places often have a very strong shame core, and their self-esteem is fragile. They think they are bad. And so we have to make sure that it is not the kid being defined by their behavior, that it is their behavior that was bad, not the child that was bad. For example, saying it's not okay to hit versus mean people hit. So we want to make sure that it is at the behavior, not at the child. So that was a bad behavior, not you're a bad kid. That's what leveling the behavior is. So then our last is just my contact information. So we have time. I want to give you guys a chance to unmute yourself. And if you have any questions about anything or any of those things, then go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your questions.
Can you go back to that previous slide just for like 2 seconds?
I think so. Yep.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions from anyone? Okay, well, I did record this. I started maybe like 10 minutes into it because I forgot. But I am planning on doing this training again, and I will try my best to remember to record it from minute 1. But I can share this out with you. I'm going to email out a survey to everyone that I would really appreciate if you would take, just so I could know moving forward, things that were helpful, things that I could change. If you would like to see more trainings like this, that would be helpful also. So it'd take you like 2 to 3 minutes. If you could fill out that survey and send it in, I mean, it's a Survey Monkey. You don't have to send it in. It just goes to the website. But if you could do that, that would be super helpful for me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and you guys, like I said, thank you guys all for coming. If you have any questions whatsoever, please let me know. I'm going to type also my email address here. Ooh, hang on. Yep. So if you have any questions about any of this stuff, please feel free to call me, text me, send me an email, and I would love to answer your questions for you. So I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting, and I hope you guys have a great weekend and find the good in every day, even when we are in shutdown. So y'all have a great, blessed day.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
See ya.